The national preceptor said I was born with a coy fate, a fate of boundless luck, so the moment I came of age at 15, I was sent to the Crown Prince's manor. I get it, a lucky charm, plain and simple, but things seemed to be going a little off the rails. On my first day here, the Crown Prince fell and broke his leg. Confined to bed rest for 7 long days, the Crown Princess ordered me to attend to his recovery, and that very night, a beam in the chamber collapsed, to calm his frayed nerves. I was told to brew tonic soups and prepare his meals. The result, the entire Crown Prince's manor was struck by food poisoning, nearly wiping everyone out in one fell swoop. The Crown Prince, dragging his injured leg, cornered the national preceptor. A coy fate. The Crown Prince laughed, a cold, bitter sound of fury. I shrank back behind the national preceptor for cover. The old man stroked his white beard, unflappable, though misfortunes have abounded. Consort, you has remained unharmed through it all. Is this not luck itself? I nodded vigorously. Precisely, precisely. The Crown Prince's laughter turned acerbic. So her luck means everyone else's misfortune. Is that it? Exactly. No, I froze mid-nod, appalled. What kind of talk was that? My very first words upon stepping into this manor were a warning. The stone paths are thick with moss, slippery and treacherous after rain. He'd insisted on showing off his lightness skill anyway. Tripping over his own feet and breaking his leg, the Crown Prince caught the accusatory glint in my eyes, and memories of his own foolish stunt flashed across his face. He coughed awkwardly, scrambling to change the subject. What about the beam? Then, the manor's halls are built solid as a rock. Why did it collapse the second you arrived? I gave him a look that said it all, a single beam, burdened with over 20 hidden guards crouching on it. It was only natural it reached the end of its days. And the food poisoning, what do you have to say for that? I lifted my chin, unapologetic. Those mushrooms were sitting in the small kitchen. Naturally, I thought they were edible. I was the one who should be wronged. No one bothered to tell me they were for poisoning rats. If I hadn't stuffed myself silly with pastries that day, I would have fallen ill too. The Crown Prince slammed his sleeve and stormed off. After that, I didn't lay eyes on him for days on end, but I didn't have the slightest time to spare thinking about him. The Crown Prince's manor was absolutely marvelous. A few days prior, the manor had held a feast. Once the guests had left, I'd wandered the courtyards aimlessly, a silver piece at every 5 steps, a gold ingot at every 10, though I'd never lacked for gold or silver. Who in their right mind would turn down more money? The other consorts in the manor, hearing of my luck, no longer cooped themselves up in their courtyards. They wandered about too, only to find nothing, not a single coin. Their gazes fixed on me, thick with resentment. Consort Roan, tired from her fruitless wandering, decided to rest in a pavilion. As she passed me, she let out a shrill yelp, as if twisting her ankle, and hurtled toward me. Just then, I spotted a glint of something in the grass ahead. I quickened my steps, and sure enough, it was the hairpin the Crown Princess had been searching for days on end. I just picked it up when a loud splash echoed from behind me. I turned back, bewildered, and glanced up at the sun. It's not even hot today. Why has Consort Roan gone for a swim? Consort Roan, flailing in the water, spared a single venomous glare for me. Are you blind? I fell in. Someone, help me at once. Seeing she was in no real danger, I turned on my heel and hurried off to claim my reward from the Crown Princess. That hairpin, a relic from her mother, was priceless to her. Sure enough, the Crown Princess, who'd barely eaten or drunk for days, was so overjoyed that night she ate an extra half bowl of rice. Watching me devour pastries with gusto, she decreed I'd receive an extra portion every day from then on. I was savoring a pastry, cheeks stuffed full, when the Crown Prince, absent for days, appeared, and at his heels, the simpering Consort Roan. I shoveled a few more big bites into my mouth. Chances were I wouldn't get to finish this. Sure enough, the moment the Crown Prince sat down, Consort Roan burst into tears. Her tale, in short, I'd plotted to push her into the water. The Crown Prince's gaze swept over me. I hastily swallowed the last bite of pastry, washed it down with a quick sip of tea, and met his eyes with the utmost sincerity. She fell in on her own. Consort Roan, who'd expected me to panic and stammer out excuses. I did say that path needed to be repaved, didn't I? Constant slips and falls are no joke. The Crown Prince, his leg finally healed, Consort Roang's brows knotted in anger. You clearly saw me stumbling toward you, yet you dodged, letting me fall in. How can you claim it was an accident? I grew even more earnest. I didn't see a thing. I was too busy rushing to pick up the Crown Princess's lost hairpin. The Crown Princess obligingly held up the hairpin for all to see. The Crown Prince stared at me for a long moment. Then ruled the incident an accident. Consort Roang's face turned black as thunder, her eyes darted about, and she muttered under her breath, loud enough for all to hear, "Before this sister entered the manor, all was calm and peaceful here. Yet the second she arrived, troubles have sprouted up one after another, and it's only her courtyard that's been untouched by misfortune. Could this so-called coy fate be nothing more than her siphoning the good luck of others, too?" The words left her lips, and she clapped a hand over her mouth as if she'd only just realized her mistake. "Forgive me, sister, I spoke foolishly." I stared at her, speechless. Could she have made her act any more obvious? I opened my mouth to speak, but to my surprise, the Crown Prince spoke first. "If you know it was foolish talk, do not utter it again." Consort Roang froze, stunned. The Crown Prince continued, his voice firm. "This only proves consort you calms the manor and wards off misfortune, Crown Princess." Consort Roang, I twitched the corner of my mouth. "So I really was just a lucky charm, then? It seems I have spoiled you far too much of late, with such unruly words and deeds. From this day forth, you are confined to your courtyard for a month of reflection." Consort Roang was led away, her face a mask of disbelief. I returned to my own courtyard, equally dumbfounded. I couldn't fathom why the Crown Prince, who'd been so displeased with me our last meeting, was suddenly defending me. The Crown Prince shot me a sidelong glance, his voice flat. 5 days ago, a clique plotted to form a faction for personal gain. Father flew into a rage. Oh, he'd missed the court audience because of his broken leg, and dodged a catastrophic disaster. I glanced up at his expression. Yep. A huge disaster. The autumn hunt is the day after tomorrow. You will come with me. I'd heard that in years past, only the Crown Princess and Consort Roang had accompanied him. Adding me this year, wasn't that a little too many people? The Crown Princess has only just recovered from a serious illness. She is unfit to travel. Why? Do you not wish to go? I fell into a habit, pulling a copper coin from my sleeve and flipping it onto the table. It landed perfectly upright, on its edge. I reached out and flattened it against the table, then met the Crown Prince's eyes with sincere reluctance. "I do not. Can I stay? The list of attendees has already been submitted to the Emperor. Say I've fallen gravely ill. Would you dare commit treason by deceiving the Emperor?" The Crown Prince's gaze flicked down to my hand, still pressing the coin to the table. "You can divine fortunes." I slipped the coin into my sleeve, feigning nonchalance. "Just a little something I picked up." The Crown Prince said nothing, his expression unreadable. The day of the autumn hunt arrived. Consort Roang was unrecognizable, no longer hostile. She fawned over me relentlessly instead, pressing pastries into my hands one moment, pressing a cup of wine into them the next, claiming it would soothe my throat. Her act was so transparent it was like a weasel wishing a chicken a happy new year. Frightened, I clung to a basket of fresh fruit and nibbled on it alone. Finally, she could hold back no longer. After a long string of overly polite pleasantries, I downed the cup of wine she'd pressed on me. I smacked my lips. Fine wine. Truly, pity the drug she'd slipped in ruined the taste a little. To spare any more good wine from her wasted efforts, I decided to be blunt. Laxatives ruin the flavor of good wine. Do not bother adding them next time. Consort Roang's smile froze on her face. What? I have a coy fate. My 5 senses are far sharper than ordinary people's. The taste was far too strong. Oh, and do not bother waiting for me to make a fool of myself. Funny enough, this fruit happens to counteract the effects of the drug. Consort Roang's face turned stony. She flicked her sleeve and stormed off, only for nectar from a flower to stick to her sleeve, drawing a swarm of bees in an instant, though the servants rushed to her aid. Consort Roang was left with a head covered in bee stings all the same. I ignored her murderous glare and turned toward the hunting grounds. The Crown Prince was already waiting there for me. On my 10th attempt to shoot an arrow, I missed the target entirely. The Crown Prince let out a low laugh. I smiled awkwardly. What could I say? I'd always loved the good life, and never endured the hardship of learning horseback riding or archery. But something was off today. Normally, even when I tossed stones at random, I'd hit a bird or two. I knocked another arrow and let it fly, only to startle a flock of birds into the sky. Perfect. Another miss. I was about to turn and leave when a palace servant, sent to retrieve the arrows, ran back, a letter in his hand and a grave expression on his face. Your Highness, this humble servant found this secret letter beside the arrows. It must have fallen from a tree when the birds were startled into flight. The Crown Prince took the letter, and his face darkened by the second as he read it. He abandoned the hunt at once and turned toward the Emperor's tent. The letter contained a map of the imperial capital's defenses, along with a treasonous plot to rebel against the throne. The Emperor flew into a towering rage, ordering an immediate and thorough investigation. The autumn hunt grounds were only open at fixed hours, with no one permitted to enter or leave midway, closed off completely for the rest of the time. Whoever was behind the plot had to be here, on the grounds. As expected, the culprit was caught in short order, but during the interrogation, the servant accused me of being the mastermind behind the plot. I was dragged before the Emperor's throne. The Emperor's face was stormy, unreadable. The Crown Prince's brows were furrowed tight with worry. Everyone present fell deathly silent, all except Consort Roan, whose eyes sparkled with undisguised schadenfreude. I thought back to that copper coin, standing upright on its edge, and sighed inwardly. I knew I shouldn't have come. Why couldn't anyone just let me laze about in peace? 3. The head eunuch at the Emperor's side let out a shrill shout. You sure? How dare you? Do you know your crime? I rubbed my wrists, raw from the iron chains binding them, and spoke calmly. I do not. Before the eunuch could press the accusation further, the servant fell to his knees, wailing, Consort, you, admit your guilt. This humble servant has elderly parents and a whole family to feed. I am their only hope. I do not wish to die. I stared at him, confused. If you did not wish to die, why did you commit such a crime? The servant banged his head against the ground, the sound echoing in the silent tent. Your Majesty, Your Highness, I swear it was Consort you who threatened me. She held the lives of my entire family hostage. How could I dare refuse her? I beg Your Majesty, spare my life, for I have turned state's evidence and atoned for my crime. Silence. The Emperor said nothing. I lifted my head, and my gaze locked with the Crown Prince's, his eyes sharp with scrutiny. I looked away. Your Majesty, this concubine is innocent. Consort Roan stepped forward, her voice sharp with indignation. You still dare to lie. The witness and the evidence are both here. You are the one who plotted this treason. You sure? How dare you conspire with the enemy to betray the throne? I ignored her, my eyes still fixed on the Emperor. The handwriting is not mine. This letter has nothing to do with me. Consort Roan let out a cold snort. You could have easily hired someone to write it for you. I shot her a cool glance, my voice steady. The defense map is a fake. An uproar erupted in the tent. Consort Roan's voice rose to a shriek. You claim it is fake just because you say so. Are you more knowledgeable than His Majesty and His Highness combined? Naturally not. Consort Roan opened her mouth to sneer, only for me to cut her off. But I have seen the Crown Prince's manor's defense map. While attending to His Highness during his recovery, I chanced upon it. The map in this letter only shows the defenses visible to the eye. The hidden ones are missing entirely. Even the route we took out of the palace. 2 of the checkpoints on the map are wrong. If I truly intended to betray the throne, would I have been so foolish? The Emperor's eyes darkened as he turned to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince nodded, understanding. He picked up the defense map and examined it closely. Then spoke. Father, it is as she says. The map is indeed a fake. Consort Roan panicked, her voice rising. You, I cut her off again, turning to the servant who had falsely accused me. You claim I threatened you in person. When and where did we meet? Sweat beaded on the servant's forehead as he stammered. It was 6 days ago, in the backyard of the Precious Delicacies restaurant. I nodded slowly. But 6 days ago, I spent the entire day with the Crown Princess. I ate both lunch and dinner with her, never once stepping foot outside the manor. This This concubine met with your humble servant, after nightfall, your highness, after dinner. I was in the Buddhist hall copying scriptures to pray for the Empress Dowager. The crown princess was there with me. The servant trembled violently, sweat pouring down his face like rain. Then perhaps this humble servant misremembered. It was the hour of Shu, 7 days ago. I raised an eyebrow. That night, I stayed in the Empress's palace. His Majesty himself is well aware of this. This humble servant was flustered and confused. It must have been 8 days ago. I shook my head slowly. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Do you have this straight now? The servant gritted his teeth and nodded firmly. He even put on a sincere, earnest expression, urging me to repent and turn back from my evil ways. I turned to the crown prince and sighed. Your Highness, speak the truth. 8 days ago, did I leave the manor even once? The crown prince looked at me with a complex gaze, then bowed to the emperor. Father, 8 days ago. The entire household of this son's manor was bedridden with food poisoning. It was consort Yu who tended to everyone alone, from dusk till dawn the next day. At his words, the servant's face drained of all color in an instant, and he collapsed to the ground a limp, quivering mess. The investigation finally uncovered the truth. It was the personal maid of consort Rong who had masterminded the plot, resentful that I had made her mistress suffer. She had sought to have me expelled from the crown prince's manor for good. A maid who scarcely left the manor, how could she have known even the surface defenses of the imperial capital? I twitched the corner of my mouth, a sacrificial pawn, thrown aside to protect the mastermind. In the end, the emperor issued a decree to have the servant and the maid beaten to death with rods. Consort Rong, found guilty of failing to discipline her subordinates, was demoted to a common concubine and fell gravely ill that very day. Cleared of all charges, I followed the crown prince out of the imperial tent. My knees were weak from kneeling for so long. I took only 2 steps before stumbling forward, crashing into the crown prince in front of me. The crown prince staggered back, caught off guard. At that exact moment, a sharp whistling sound cut through the air. I stared at the gash in his sleeve, my face pale with fright. Please, never bring me with you when you go out again. The imperial guard sprang into action at once, rushing to capture the assassin. But the crown prince stood frozen, staring at his sleeve in stunned silence for a long while. I fidgeted nervously. Had I spoken too harshly? Surely not. I was still debating whether to soften my words a little when the crown prince spoke. You truly are incredibly lucky. Why bring this up all of a sudden? For one in my position, assassination attempts are common. Injury is inevitable. The light in the crown prince's eyes grew brighter and brighter, a look of wonder on his face. The national preceptor was right, every word of it. From that day on, my reputation as the manor's lucky charm was sealed once and for all. Have you heard? The consort Yu in our manor is the reincarnation of a coy immortal. I know, they say anyone who draws near her will be blessed with good luck, but only if your heart is pure. If you harbor evil intentions, the luck will backfire on you. Look at the former consort Rong, she's the perfect example. Is that true? Do you believe it? I had no idea if anyone else believed it, but the crown prince certainly did. I stared at the crown prince beside me, buried in state affairs, and sighed, offering up another word of caution. Your Highness, it is far safer to handle official business in the study. The crown prince did not look up from his papers. It is fine, you have seen the defense maps yourself. I trust you. I sank back onto my imperial concubine's chair, picking up a pastry and popping it into my mouth. I turned a page of my book, took a bite of fruit, turned another page, ate another pastry, and so it went. I lounged by the window on my chair, reading storybooks and eating sweet treats, while the crown prince sat at his desk nearby, poring over memorials. We did not disturb each other. It was surprisingly peaceful. Days passed in this quiet routine. One day, the crown prince came as usual to handle his work, but half the day went by, and not a single memorial on his desk had been touched. On his 28th sigh, I finally could bear it no longer. Your Highness, sighing makes you age faster. More importantly, you are disturbing my reading. The crown prince laughed, a sound of exasperated amusement. You do not even wish to ask why I sigh. Your Highness is wise and resourceful. This concubine has no doubts about you." The crown prince stared at me for a long moment, then let out yet another sigh. I picked up my brush and made a note. 29. "You sure? I am here, Your Highness." The crown prince gazed out the window, his voice low and heavy with worry. "The war with Western-He is going badly. We have laid siege to their city for far too long, and our soldiers are weary to the bone. The common people caught in the crossfire suffer even more. Do you think this war will end soon? Can we win?" My hand, mid-brushstroke, froze. I pulled a copper coin from my sleeve, a habitual gesture, and spoke without hesitation. "What does Your Highness think?" "Naturally, I hope we win as soon as possible." His eyes were filled with genuine concern for the people, for his kingdom. A crisp clink echoed as the copper coin hit the ground. Outside the window, the wind rustled the leaves, a soft, whispering sound. "The east wind has arrived, Your Highness. Simply wait for the good news." It was not long after that Western-He was hit by its annual wind season, and a sudden, raging fire broke out within the besieged city. The Imperial Army's military rations and pay were burned to ash, nothing left. With no food, no supplies, no hope left, Western-He raised the white flag of surrender. The news of victory spread like wildfire, and the entire capital erupted in joy and celebration. At long last, the crown prince stopped sighing beside me as he worked. I savored my pastries and read my storybooks in perfect contentment. I swallowed a bite of sweet pastry, the taste lingering on my tongue, and let out a soft, satisfied hum. If I could live like this forever, just lazing about, eating sweet treats, reading silly books, I would be happy to wear gold and jade for the rest of my days. No complaints at all. Unfortunately, peace did not last. The emperor, worn thin by endless worry and toil, fell gravely ill. The entire capital prayed for his recovery, and all extravagant spending was forbidden by imperial edict. The crown prince's manor set the example. Our meals were plain and simple, no delicacies in sight, even the daily pastries were cut in half. The crown prince grew busier and busier, visiting my courtyard only once every 2 or 3 days. And after the fate of consort Roang, no, the former consort Roang, now a common concubine, no one in the manor dared to cross me again. They all feared that a single misstep, a single evil thought, would lead them down the same path as her. I did not mind. In fact, I rather enjoyed it. It was a rare peace, a quiet I had not known in a long while. One day, the crown prince came to my courtyard and stayed the night, as he often did now. That night, for the first time in a long while, I had a dream. When I woke, I was in a daze, my mind still lingering on the vision. The crown prince stirred at my movement, and without thinking, reached out to brush a hand gently over my back, his voice thick with sleep. "Bad dream. Do not fear, I am here." I stared at his sleeping face, bathed in the soft light of the moon, and spoke in a quiet whisper. "It was not a bad dream. I dreamed a koi fish leaped over the dragon's gate." The crown prince mumbled, half asleep, his eyes still closed. "Go back to sleep. Perhaps good things will come tomorrow." 5. The next day, with the emperor still gravely ill and unable to rule, he issued a decree appointing the crown prince as regent, to govern the kingdom in his stead. When the crown prince returned to the manor, he lifted me up and spun me around in a circle, his face alight with joy. "You little koi fish, you truly are a blessing to your husband." As soon as he set me down, I stepped back warily, retreating to the safety of my imperial concubine's chair. "Your Highness is the choice of the people, the rightful heir. This concubine rejoices for you." The crown prince looked at my guarded expression and laughed, a little helpless, a little fond, burdened with the duties of regent. He did not stay long before leaving to attend to state affairs, and then the treasures arrived, flowing in like water, countless and priceless, a clear sign of the crown prince's favor. Deeper and more sincere than ever before, the crown princess, seeing this, grew distant from me after that. Thankfully, she maintained the pretense of civility. We kept to our own paths, never crossing. It was perfect. I was content. Mid-autumn festival drew near, and the emperor's condition still had not improved. The court officials consulted and decided to hold a grand ritual to pray to the heavens for the emperor's recovery. On the day of the sacrifice, the weather was far from ideal. Thick, heavy clouds covered the sky, blocking out the sun, but at the very least, there was no thunder or lightning. I let out a big yawn. Truly, I wondered how the imperial astronomer had chosen this day. If it rained in the middle of the sacrifice, their heads would surely roll. The crown prince saw me about to yawn again and stepped in front of me, his movement casual and unnoticeable, blocking me from the eyes of the court. His voice was low, a little exasperated, as he spoke in my ear. "I told you to rise early today. Were you reading storybooks again last night?" I paused mid-yawn and looked at him earnestly. "I was not. I simply cannot abide by early mornings." The crown prince shot me a fond, chiding glance, urged me to stay alert, and then turned his attention back to the ritual. The crown princess stood demurely at his other side, her hands clenched so tightly at her sides her knuckles were white. My gaze flicked over her pale fingers, and I had to stifle a sigh, though I managed to hold it back, mindful of the solemn occasion. After the national preceptor finished reciting the long prayer, the imperial family stepped forward one by one to burn incense and offer their prayers to the heavens. It was an orderly procession, moving quickly, no delays. Soon, it was the turn of the crown prince's manor. As the crown princess stepped onto the sacrificial altar, the dark clouds in the sky suddenly roiled and churned. Lightning flickering faintly in the distance, a storm brewing. Everyone held their breath, their faces pale with anxiety. Thankfully, the thunder and rain never came. The crown princess burned her incense and turned to leave at once, her steps unsteady and hurried as she descended the altar. Only when she stood safely at the bottom did she let out a shaky breath of relief. She watched as I picked up my incense, preparing to step onto the altar. As I passed her, she leaned in and whispered, her words vague and ominous, heavy with malice, "Look at the celestial omens. Trouble is coming. I hope disaster does not befall us all." I met her malicious gaze and smiled, saying nothing in reply. Disaster? That word had never once crossed my path. The moment my foot touched the first step of the altar, the churning dark clouds in the sky froze, as if frozen in time. As I climbed the steps one by one, the oppressive, heavy clouds overhead began to part, slowly, steadily, drifting away. By the time I lit my incense and offered my prayer to the heavens, the clouds had scattered completely, and the sun burst forth from behind them, shining bright and warm over the capital. A gasp went up from the crowd below, loud and awestruck. A miracle, a sign from the heavens. She is a daughter of fate. Even the empress, who had been drowned in sorrow for months, cracked a small smile on her face. Only the crown princess's expression grew darker and darker, her face contorted with rage and jealousy. I descended the altar slowly, calm and unhurried. I paused beside the crown princess and smiled, my voice light and cheerful. "Your Highness was right. The celestial omens have indeed changed." TSK, the crown princess's face was so dark, it looked as if it might rain at any moment. I kept my guard up for the next few days, expecting the crown princess to make her move, but she did not. She left me in peace. Soon, it was the empress's birthday. The Empress Dowager suggested a grand celebration to bring joy and good fortune to the palace, to ward off the ill luck of the emperor's illness. Knowing the empress loved the Buddha, I decided to commission a precious Buddha statue as her birthday gift. The crown prince, who happened to be free, decided to accompany me to the artisan's workshop to choose it. My carriage was filled to the brim with pastries and sweet treats, so much so that there was no room for a grown man like the crown prince to sit, and so, 2 carriages set off from the manor, one behind the other. For some reason, whether it was the jostling of the carriage, or something else, I could not shake a feeling of unease in my chest. Even the pastries, my favorite treats, tasted bland and unappetizing. After nearly choking on a pastry for the 3rd time, I ordered the carriage to stop. I climbed out in a huff and stormed onto the crown prince's carriage, slamming the door shut behind me. To hell with these choking pastries. I would not eat another one. Out of sight, out of mind. The crown prince heard my angry explanation and laughed, amused, and was about to say something when a deafening, earth-shaking roar split the air. The carriage jolted violently, shaking so hard I nearly fell out of my seat. The crown prince moved faster than lightning. Pulling me into his arms and shielding me with his body, his grip tight and protective. "What is happening, Your Highness?" A landslide has suddenly occurred behind us, but thankfully, Consort Yu's carriage was behind ours. It blocked the falling boulders, taking the full brunt of the collapse. The guard's voice was shaky with fear, relief evident in every word. "Thank the heavens Consort Yu switched carriages ahead of time, otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable." 6. I leaned out of the carriage window and stared, my mouth agape. My once gorgeous carriage lay in ruins, crushed beneath countless massive boulders, unrecognizable. If anyone had been inside, they would not have survived, not a single soul. The crown prince stared at the pile of broken stone and splintered wood, his face dark and stormy, his eyes cold with rage. This mountain slope had always been stable, not even an earthquake had ever caused a landslide here. "Investigate." His voice was a low growl, a single word heavy with fury. The Imperial Guards did not dare to delay. That night, the truth was uncovered. It was the Crown Princess's family who had done it. Their target was never the Crown Prince. To plot the murder of the heir apparent, were they tired of having their 9 clans alive and well? Their original order had been to eliminate me. They had never imagined the Crown Prince would be with me too. They had hesitated, debating whether to bide their time and wait for another chance. But I scarcely ever left the manor, my comings and goings few and far between, missed this opportunity, and who knew how long they would have to wait, and the Crown Princess had pressed them hard, her demands urgent, so they had gritted their teeth and acted. They had calculated the timing to perfection, double-checking that the Crown Prince would not be harmed, only my carriage would be crushed, leaving no trace, no survivors. Events had unfolded exactly as they had planned. They had never anticipated that I would switch carriages midway, and so, their plot had failed, all their efforts for naught. When the Crown Princess learned the plot had been exposed, she did not argue, did not fly into a hysterical rage. She simply bowed low as she always did, her demeanor poised and composed, the picture of a proper noble lady. This concubine knows she has committed a grave crime, her sins unforgivable. "I am willing to die to atone for my wrongdoing, and beg only that your highness spare the Yun clan." The Crown Prince's face was dark with fury, and he said not a word. The Crown Princess sank to her knees and kowtowed heavily, her forehead striking the cold stone floor. "All of this stemmed from my jealousy, my own foolishness. It is my sin alone. I beg your highness for mercy, for the sake of the childhood affection we once shared." I had to admire her, and sure enough, her gamble had paid off. The Crown Prince fell into a long, heavy silence, and in the end, he did not order her death. He issued a decree stripping her of her title as Crown Princess, and exiled her to guard the imperial mausoleum for the rest of her days. I went to see her off on the day she left. "Why?" I asked. The former Crown Princess cast me a cold glance, her voice flat and emotionless. "You were far too great a threat to me." I frowned, confused. "I never once thought of replacing you. My only wishes had always been simple, to eat my fill, to wear warm clothes, to live a happy, carefree life. I had never coveted a high position, never desired power. After all, the higher the position, the heavier the burden, the more tiring the life. It was not a life I wanted, not in the least." "Does your will matter?" she asked. With those words, she turned her back on me and stepped onto the carriage, never to look back, with the Crown Princess gone from the manor, and Consort Roang demoted from her position. It was only natural that the responsibility of running the manor fell to me, but I lasted only half a day before I could bear it no longer. I had known it all along. High positions were not easy to hold, least of all for someone like me, who only wanted to laze about and live a quiet life. The Crown Prince came to my courtyard for dinner that night. As acting regent, the weight of state affairs on his shoulders had grown heavier and heavier, and his face bore the clear marks of exhaustion. I stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing. "What amuses you so?" the Crown Prince asked, perplexed. "Your Highness, we are truly in the same boat," I said. "We are both worn ragged by endless trivialities and burdens." The Crown Prince let out a soft chuckle. "To hold a position is to bear its responsibilities." I clammed up at once. "Fine, The burden was mine to bear, there was no escaping it, unwilling to give up. I tested the waters again before bed, my voice tentative. Your Highness, it seems this concubine is truly not cut out for managing a manor. The crown prince, tired to the bone after a long day and craving nothing more than sleep, sighed and asked, helpless, what do you wish to do? Then, my eyes lit up at once. Find help, delegate the work to others, and have them report to me only once every 7 days. Will that do, for example? Concubine Xiao is good at arithmetic, she can manage the accounts. Concubine Kui loves to talk and socialize, she can attend banquets outside the manor in my stead. Concubine Sun enjoys. I did not get to finish my list before the crown prince rubbed his temples and cut me off. Others would fight tooth and nail for the power to manage the manor, and yet you go to great lengths to avoid it. Your Highness, you know this concubine well. I fear trouble more than anything in the world. As long as the manor remains in order, you may arrange it as you see fit. That was his agreement. I fell silent at once, overjoyed, and drifted off to a peaceful, contented sleep. The crown prince, however, found himself unable to sleep, away from the tension of state affairs. His heart was filled with a restless unease that lingered into the night. He turned his head to look at me, his voice soft and faint as he spoke into the darkness. Gently, tell me, when will I ascend the throne? When we shared a bed, the crown prince always referred to himself simply as I, like a common husband and wife. No titles, no pretense. I was half asleep, my guard down completely, and I answered without thinking, my voice mumbled and sleepy. Soon, the crown prince stared at me for a long, long moment. Seeing that I had fallen sound asleep again, he dismissed my words as nothing more than a dream, a sleepy murmur. 3 months later, the emperor, citing illness and the need for rest and recuperation, issued a decree abdicating the throne to the crown prince. The crown prince ascended to the throne as emperor, and I left the crown prince's manor and moved into the imperial harem. I was named noble consort by all rights. A former consort being elevated to the position of noble consort meant either deep seniority or immense favor from the emperor, yet it seemed I had neither. Ever since the emperor had received the abdication edict, he had scarcely come to my palace, and when he did look at me, his gaze held a faint, unspoken emotion, something like wariness, even fear. 7. I did not understand it, but for the time being, it brought me a precious peace and quiet, though the position of empress remained empty. The concubines in the harem were all the same women from the crown prince's manor, familiar faces all. After months of working together and learning to coexist, we had fallen into a smooth routine. Even after moving into the imperial harem, everyone knew their duties and performed them well. There was no chaos, no infighting, no power vacuum to fill. I thought this life was perfect, just as I had always wanted. It would be even better if a virtuous, gentle empress were to be named. One who would take over all the affairs of the harem and lift the burden from my shoulders. Unfortunately, no empress was named. Instead, the emperor began to visit my palace again. He sat with me for meals just as he had in the crown prince's manor, his manner unchanged, only his gaze, when it fell on me, remained as complex and unreadable as ever. I bit back my curiosity time and time again, but in the end, I set down my chopsticks and sighed. Your Majesty, if you have something to say, say it plainly. This constant staring is ruining my appetite and my speed of eating. The emperor choked on his food, a look of helpless amusement crossing his face. You are now a noble consort, and yet you remain as gluttonous as ever. I frowned, offended by his words. What kind of talk is that? Food is the paramount necessity of the people. Only true-heartedness and good food are worthy of being cherished and never let go. The emperor's gaze flickered for a moment, and he ignored my indignant protest, his voice soft and faint as he said, I have spoken with the national preceptor. What did he say? I asked at once. You do not even ask what I asked him. It was undoubtedly about the way my words always come true. Your Majesty. The emperor's eyes darkened, his tone unreadable. You know me far too well. I looked at him earnestly, my voice sincere. Every time you go to see the national preceptor, it is always about this concubine. Without exception. It was plain as day. Your Majesty, no need for guesswork. The emperor raised an eyebrow. How do you know it is simply your words coming true, and not something else? All things in this world leave traces. Follow the cause, and you will find the effect. The emperor raised a hand and rubbed his temples, exasperated. Speak in plain words, no more riddles. Oh, after that night you asked me about ascending the throne, your attitude toward me changed far too obviously, there was no hiding it. The emperor fell silent, at a loss for words. I leaned forward, curious. So what did the national preceptor say? The emperor stared at me for a long moment, his gaze deep and unwavering. His words were much the same as yours. With that, he ignored my confused expression and fell silent, eating his meal in quiet solitude, no longer speaking to me. After that day, the emperor began to visit my palace frequently once more, just as he had in the crown prince's manor. He would sit at his desk and review memorials, while I lounged on my imperial couch, reading storybooks and eating pastries and fresh fruit. Days passed in peaceful routine, and soon the Mid-Autumn Festival arrived. Ministers of the court submitted memorial after memorial, urging the emperor to name an empress at once. The emperor was driven to the brink of exasperation by their endless pleas. Even when he sat with me to watch the full moon that night, he had no appetite for mooncakes. I took the opportunity to eat several more mooncakes, my heart filled with quiet joy. Perhaps joy always begets sorrow. I took a big bite of a mooncake and nearly broke a tooth. I stared at the mooncake in confusion, then pried it open to look inside. Tucked within the sweet pastry was a single South China Sea merman pearl, round and plump, its luster bright and iridescent. It was clearly a priceless treasure, a rare gem, the kind of pearl that would be coveted by all, no matter where it appeared. But it had no place in a mooncake. It should never have been there, not in the least. I huffed in anger and tossed the pearl onto the table. Then, abiding by my lifelong principle of never wasting good food, I picked up the mooncake and continued eating. The emperor stared at me for a long moment, then spoke. Do you know what that is? I did not look up from my mooncake, my mouth full. A South China Sea merman pearl. What does it signify? It is the pearl used exclusively for the empress's phoenix crown. You feel no interest in it, no desire to have it. I finally looked up from my mooncake, my gaze fleeting over the pearl, its surface shimmering softly in the pale moonlight, before my attention was once again captured by the sweet pastry in my hand. It is very beautiful, I said, but the mooncake is far more appealing to this concubine. The emperor stared at me in silence for a long, long time. And as I took the last bite of my mooncake, he spoke, his voice flat and decisive, no hint of a question in his words. Tomorrow, I will issue a decree naming you empress. It was not a request, it was an order. My movements froze. I looked at him, my confusion genuine, and asked, why? The emperor let out a soft chuckle. Because you do not want it. In that moment, I thought of the former crown princess's words. My will truly did not matter. But I was more curious than ever about the shift in the emperor's attitude. He had once looked at me with wariness, even fear, so why the sudden change? The thought lingered in my mind, and I asked the question aloud. A faint flush of embarrassment crossed the emperor's face, a rare sight for a ruler of men. I spoke with the national preceptor, he said. He told me that to treat someone with a true heart brings boundless blessings in return. You once said that only true-heartedness and good food are worthy of being cherished and never let go. This position of empress, he said, his voice soft, sincere, is my true heart for you. 8. A ruler's true heart. I said nothing, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. The emperor let out a soft sigh and spoke plainly, his voice honest and open. Your fate is extraordinary. Your aura of good fortune surrounds you, and you are the one favored by heaven. The one destined for this position. I did not need him to finish his words to understand. If I were to fall into the hands of another, his throne would never be secure. It was far better to bind me to his side, to keep me close and honor me well, to nurture the good fortune that surrounded me, and in doing so, strengthen the fortune of his entire kingdom. I fell into a long silence, thinking carefully, then frowned and asked, in the future, the 4 noble concubines will assist in managing the harem. Would it be acceptable for them to hold the phoenix seal in turns, each in charge for a time? Do you think that is appropriate? the emperor asked, perplexed. I argued my case firmly. Why not? Look at the harem now, it is orderly and peaceful, running like a well-oiled machine. Ever since the concubines had been given their own duties and responsibilities, their desire to compete for the emperor's favor had faded. And the petty scheming and infighting that plagued most harems had vanished entirely. The emperor thought of the peaceful, harmonious atmosphere of the harem, and did not object. I pressed my advantage, seizing the moment. This concubine loves quiet and solitude, aside from major festivals and ceremonies. May I be excused from the daily morning and evening greetings to the Empress Dowager and other royals, as you wish, except for important imperial ceremonies. May I refrain from making public appearances in the harem? Very well. I made 7 or 8 such requests in quick succession, then looked at the emperor, my voice earnest. Your Majesty, one last request. May I ask that my father be allowed to resign from his official position and return to his hometown to live out his days in peace? Once I was named empress, there would be no shortage of people who would try to curry favor with my father and my clan, seeking to use our connection for their own gain. Forming cliques and plotting for power was a capital crime. It was far better for him to step away from the imperial court early, to live a quiet life away from the dangers of the capital. Besides, my father had never cared for power or position, not in the least. In that regard, we were very much alike. The emperor looked at me in surprise, but did not question my request. Instead, he let out a long, deep breath of relief and agreed at once. His answer swift and decisive. With that, I had no more objections. The elaborate, tedious empress coronation ceremony passed in a blur, and after the necessary formalities and appearances, I retreated to the cunning palace and did not step foot outside its gates unless absolutely necessary. I spent my days ordering the palace maids to find me new, interesting storybooks, and lazing about in peace. The emperor still came to my palace every single day. Sometimes he even brought me fresh, delicious snacks and delicacies from the imperial kitchen. I wiped my lips contentedly after each meal, my heart full. Was this not the lazy, carefree life of luxury I had always wanted? Only occasionally did I have to share the emperor's worries. Every now and then, the emperor would sit beside me and sigh, his face filled with the weight of state affairs. And so it was that day. He had been reviewing memorials for no more than a moment when he sighed for the 32nd time. I sighed and set down my storybook, helpless, then picked up a peeled grape and held it to his lips. The emperor ate the grape, then opened up, pouring out his troubles to me at last. Consort Roang, once demoted to a common concubine, had been elevated to the position of noble consort Roang upon entering the imperial harem. No longer favored by the emperor, her family had grown anxious and had begun to send large sums of silver into the palace, seeking to bribe officials and eunuchs. Hoping to win back the emperor's favor for her, their greatest wish was for her to conceive a prince, to bear the emperor a son, and in doing so, elevate her position once more. But such a plot required a vast amount of silver, far more than her family could easily afford, and so they had turned to smuggling private salt to amass the fortune they needed. But salt smuggling was not a crime to be taken lightly. It was a capital offense, punishable by death, should they be caught. It would bode ill for a new emperor to begin his reign with a spate of executions. After a moment's thought, I sent for noble consort Roang, who had been lingering in the imperial garden for days on end, hoping to catch the emperor's eye. I had never cared for beating around the bush, so I cut straight to the point. The emperor is diligent in governing the state and has no time for the harem. Salt and iron are state monopolies, you know this, do you not? Noble consort Roang scoffed. Her chin tilted in disdain. Do you have proof? You know as well as I do that my luck is unparalleled. Noble consort Roang opened her mouth to retort, then paled suddenly, her voice trembling. You rarely leave the cunning palace. How could you possibly? I finished her sentence for her, my tone light and teasing. How could I know? Yes, do tell, how did I find out? Panic etched across her face. Noble consort Roang hurried back to her palace, scrawling a letter in a frenzy and ordering her most trusted maid to send it to her family under the cover of night. The very next day, her father presented a large stock of salt to the court. He claimed it had been seized from bandits during a recent campaign, only just transported to the capital that day. He even bowed and said he did not dare accept the emperor's rewards, apologizing profusely for the delay on the road. After that, the Roan clan fell silent. Keeping their heads down and stirring up no more trouble, noble consort Roan, too, stopped lingering in the imperial garden. I returned to the cunning palace once more, resuming my quiet life of ease and comfort. But just as the fire in the harem was put out, a flood broke out in the imperial court. That night was the emperor's turn to stay in my palace. I lay down early, ready to rest, but the emperor beside me tossed and turned, unable to sleep, sighing. I opened my eyes and reached out to smooth the furrow between his brows. "Your Majesty, speak your mind. What troubles you?" The emperor's voice was heavy with worry as he spoke. Recent days had brought relentless rain to the south, and a few days prior, a dam had burst under the deluge. Floodwaters raged across the land, leaving countless people homeless in an instant. Natural disasters always brought hordes of displaced refugees. If their suffering went unaddressed for long, it would only be a matter of time before someone rose up in rebellion, threatening the stability of the entire kingdom. Every day, a dozen or more memorials pleading for disaster relief arrived at the palace. Yet the imperial treasury was empty. Even the emperor's private coffers had been drained to the last coin, but it was a drop in the bucket, far from enough to stem the crisis. And whenever the emperor proposed raising funds from the court officials, they all wept poor, clutching their chests and claiming they had no silver to spare. My gaze fell on a bunch of freshly picked marigolds on the table beside me. "The chrysanthemums in the imperial garden are in full bloom just now," I said softly. "Tomorrow, this concubine will invite all the noble ladies of the capital to come admire them with me." A flicker of hope lit up in the emperor's eyes. At last, he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. 9. The next day, the imperial garden was alive with bustle and laughter. I led the concubines of the harem in welcoming the noble ladies, wandering the gardens together to admire the chrysanthemums in full bloom. At my quiet instruction, the concubines sought out the ladies they knew well, falling into seemingly casual conversations. In these talks, they let slip inadvertently that the palace was seeking new imperial merchants. Traders granted the exclusive right to do business with the royal family. And if an official recommended a merchant who proved capable and loyal, it would be counted as a great merit to that official's name. It just so happened that the emperor was now raising funds for disaster relief. If the wealthy merchants of the capital took the initiative to donate silver to the court, their chances of being selected as imperial merchants would rise 100-fold. Choosing between backing a noble clan and backing the royal family itself was no choice at all. The noble ladies exchanged a glance, their faces calm and impassive, saying nothing of what they had heard, but as soon as they returned to their manners, they lost no time in contacting the wives of the wealthiest merchants in the capital, hosting banquets one after another to pass on the message. 3 days later, the imperial court received a flood of donations from the wealthy merchants of the common people. The imperial treasury was filled to the brim in an instant, with enough silver in hand. The refugees were given food, shelter, and relief. Grateful, they volunteered to join the court's disaster relief efforts, working alongside the officials and soldiers to repair the dams and rebuild their homes. Officials and common people stood as one, united in their fight against the flood. Before long, the disaster was brought under control. A rebellion that had been brewing in the shadows was snuffed out in its infancy. The emperor was overjoyed. Issuing a proclamation praising every merchant who had contributed to the disaster relief fund, after careful consideration, he selected 2 merchant families to be the new imperial merchants of the court. I lay on a reclining chair in the cunning palace, eating the cold sweet curd the new imperial merchants had sent as a gift, and closed my eyes in pure contentment. The emperor walked in and saw me sprawled out like this, and sighed in mock exasperation. "I have told you time and again you must sit up to eat these sweet soups and curds. You will choke if you lay down like this, and it will be no one's fault but your own." I smiled obediently, but did not move an inch, continuing to eat the curd in peace. The emperor shook his head, helpless against me. and sat down at his desk to review memorials. By the time he finished his work, my bowl of cold curd was long empty. I was lying there, staring out the window at the white clouds drifting across the blue sky, lost in thought. The emperor's gaze fell on me, softening. He called my name in a low, gentle voice. Gently. I blinked, startled out of my reverie, and turned to meet his eyes. Trapped in this deep palace day after day, year after year. Do you ever feel wronged? I looked at him, my eyes clear and calm, and asked in return, Your Majesty rarely leaves the palace either. You have seen so little of the great rivers and mountains of your kingdom. Do you ever feel wronged? Never, he said without hesitation. Why? To hold a position is to bear its responsibilities. I smiled, a soft, warm smile, and shook my head. This concubine has never felt wronged either. The emperor blinked, surprised. Why? For the same reason as you, Your Majesty. I have enjoyed the great honors and blessings of this position. So I am willing to bear the corresponding restraints and obligations. Besides, I said, leaning back on the reclining chair and picking up a new bowl of cold curd the maids had just brought in, I do not have to worry about a single thing. Every day, I eat well, drink well, and sleep well. I have endless new storybooks to read. This concubine is lying here in perfect comfort. The sweet, creamy taste of the curd slid down my throat, cool and refreshing. A soft breeze drifted in through the open window, carrying the faint scent of chrysanthemums. I let out a soft, satisfied sigh. To tell you the truth, Your Majesty, this is exactly the lazy, carefree life I have always dreamed of. The emperor laughed, a deep, warm laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Why are you not like other fish, yearning for the freedom of the open sea? I took a slow, leisurely bite of the curd, and spoke in a calm, unhurried tone. Every fish has its own nature. Your Majesty, this koi fish happens to love nothing more than lying peacefully in a safe, quiet pond. The emperor stared at me for a long time, his gaze growing softer and warmer with every passing moment, until it was filled with nothing but tender fondness. He nodded, his voice gentle as a whisper. Very well. Lie here, then. This pond is safe for you always. I smiled, my heart light and full. An emperor's words are unbreakable. An emperor's words are unbreakable. With the emperor's promise, I embraced my lazy, carefree life of happiness completely. In the years that followed, the 4 noble concubines grew more and more skilled at managing the affairs of the harem. They maintained a quiet, unspoken balance of power between them, checking each other's excesses. The imperial court sent new concubines to the harem from time to time, and the 4 noble concubines managed them all with ease. Aside from the occasional petty squabble and jealousy between the concubines, trivial things, nothing more. The harem was peaceful and calm, a place of quiet order. I became even more unnecessary than before, a true lucky charm that guards the palace, as the servants whispered behind their hands. My days were simple and sweet, sunbathing in the courtyard, reading storybooks for hours on end, counting the precious treasures the emperor sent me as gifts, and tasting all the delicious delicacies the imperial kitchen could conjure. Every now and then, I accompanied the emperor on incognito trips out of the palace, wandering the rivers and mountains of our kingdom together, like an ordinary husband and wife. The days passed slowly and peacefully, one after another. The warm sunlight fell on me day after day, bright and gentle, endless and eternal.